Somewhere between waking and dreaming, between the hum of the universe and the silence within your soul, there is a doorway that your mind and your consciousness holds the key to stepping outside the physical world into something far vaster. Today, we are diving into one of the most mysterious, controversial, and mind-expanding government documents ever declassified: the Gateway Experience. In 1983, the U.S. Army commissioned a report on something most people would call science fiction, a technique designed to alter human consciousness using sound frequencies, intention, and deep meditation to access expanded states of awareness, remote viewing, astral projection, even contact with other dimensions. It sounds like a plot ripped from a sci-fi novel, or maybe a conspiracy forum. But this was real, documented, studied, and hidden in plain sight until recently. What is the Gateway Experience? Who created it? And why was the CIA so interested in the idea that we could escape the confines of time and space? Today, we begin our journey through sound, science, and spirit. Strap in, because reality might not be what you think it is.
Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Jason.
Hello, everyone.
Normally, it would be Stoney as well, but he had to...
Yeah, Stoney had a little deal to take care of, so it's just going to be the duo, the millennial and the Xer. So,
and I'm kind of like, again, this is another like big one that I'm kind of sad that he can't be here for, because I feel like this is like the end of a trilogy. Of a big...
It is. Well, I think next week we're going to tap into kind of a similar theme thing, but I mean, that's not going to be what the ones we've discussed before on the other episodes. What we've been discussing are programs that have now been exposed through declassified documents.
All kind of like sort of hinting at the same sort of things.
Yeah, well, I think it was all underneath the same umbrella of stuff. And we'll kind of go into that a little bit, but we've talked about, a few of the other things that, a lot of this stuff taps into the same subject matter. I mean, because while it's separate and specific in what they were trying to accomplish, it's still kind of under that umbrella of, occult sciences and those kind of things. So, I people out there, when I talk to them about this stuff, they think you're crazy or they just kind of brush you off. And I say, no, this stuff is real. I mean, this is not making this stuff up. There's actually real documentation out there that our government spent taxpayer money doing this stuff.
Is the content itself real? That's still up for interpretation, I guess. But you're right. There was taxpayer dollars going into these like crazy kind of projects.
I mean, you think about all the ones we talked about. MK Ultra and Stargate. All of this is. It, as I say, they're all, these people probably all
are related in some way,
crossed in their paths in doing this stuff. So, I guess people would say, well, what is it? We're talking about the Gateway Experience, and this is, more stuff dealing with some things that I think the first time I heard of the term astral projection was probably when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons back in the early 80s, in the mid 80s. that you heard about that, and then of course everybody knew about the TV with Shirley MacLaine and all that stuff that she supposedly experienced. I had no idea about the CIA was ever in any of this stuff at all.
The first time I heard of astral projection was like in the reference of like dreaming and like lucid dreaming. That was like the first time I heard that term, and was like, oh, this is kind of so for me, it all kind of feels lumped into that same like, controlling dream aspect and like this kind of all that stuff. But I've actually never heard. I've heard about MK Ultra. I've heard about Stargate and all that stuff. I didn't recognize the Gateway experience. This is the first one out of the three that I didn't.
I really kind of came upon this stuff when I was researching some of the other topics we were doing. So, but I think to provide a little bit of some history of kind of what drove all this stuff. People would ask why is our government looking into this stuff? I mean, what's going on here? So this is something I found, and but in 1945, the U.S. launched a scientific, for lack of a better term, it was an initiative, titled Operation ASOS, ASOS.
Okay,
and its objective was to recover intelligence on scientific and militaristic projects conducted under the Third Reich. After World War II, and of course, everybody knew about the space program and the United States bringing a lot of Nazi scientists over that were working on the V8 or V2 rocket. I think it was the V2 rocket. And of course, that is their intellect and their help is what propelled the U.S. space program. So, but it appears that these scientists were also involved in a lot of other things. So when the Allies and they went in and they probably talked to these scientists and went in there and found all their research, but what they found was a cache of documents related to the Anerbi, if I'm pronouncing it right, Anerbi, I believe it's the way it's pronounced. This was a scientific academy and think tank dedicated to this study of occult sciences. The Allies, they found very extensive research on extrasensory perception, spirit channeling, divination, and other forms of anomalous phenomena. The paranormal was being scientifically investigated, but to what ends is unclear.
Right.
So we really don't know what the Nazis were trying to do with this stuff. Now, of course, some of this stuff, we touched on in some other episodes. A lot of this stuff, like we found out in MK Ultra, where they got the information on MK Ultra came from these documents. So, just for everybody to be clear, how all this got started was, in essence, the Nazis were researching, probably very using probably unethical means on unsuspecting victims, and even victims they didn't care about, but they were doing some of this stuff. So that's where is where the kind of this was birthed. At the time, it was the end of World War II. You got the setting of the Cold War. We do know that the Soviets were also investigating some of this stuff already. In many ways, they were probably ahead of the game. And the United States was probably desperate because, I mean, we're talking about, controlling people's minds and creating Manchurian candidates and infiltrating the government and all these things that are that was driving, this paranoia was driving a lot of this research. So, but so this stuff is going on for decades. Eventually, some of this stuff gets declassified, and it was pretty much a nothing. Really, nobody paid any attention to it until this one document was declassified in 2003 by the U.S. Army, and the document was titled "Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process."
Right.
And it detailed a scientific technique developed by the Monroe Institute.
Oh, and
To-
this is I
that
have
brings up something.
I have briefly heard about the Monroe Institute, but I didn't realize that it was in conjunction with this. And this is one of those things where, like you're saying, I start looking into one thing and then start finding out about all this other stuff. So like I've heard stories and I've listened to shows and I've like read stuff on the Monroe Institute and like how I think his name was Robert Monroe. Yeah, Robert Monroe, who founded it. Back in like the 50s, how that whole situation started and how kind of crazy that went. I think we'll get into that later in this episode. But like, so that's what I'm talking about. It's like I've heard about that guy, and so yes, it starts kind of everything starts to come together. You know, about what's what and who's where and all that kind of stuff. But
I've actually downloaded the actual.
Okay. Oh my gosh! Look at that.
The military document.
Look at that.
Was declassified in 2003, which prompted interest in what our government was doing.
It's got the seal and everything.
But it's that's the whole document there. And for just for our audience out there, I you can't see it, but I actually printed out. You can go to the web and
and it's a big document.
Put in the document. It's a very, very hard read. It's very dense.
Yeah.
It contains a lot of information, and I encourage anybody to just Google that document, the analysis and assessment of the gateway process, and just let it pull up. There's all kind of stuff.
To Commander, U.S. Army Operational Group, Fort Meade. Look at that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
It feels, even though this is just a copy of it, it feels official to hold a document that says Department of the Army, U.S. Army Operational Group, Intelligence and Security Command. That's so cool.
Yeah, so it was interesting, kind of looking forward through it, just to kind of let you know about the thing about this. I mean, the colonel who did this, I forget his name,
Lieutenant Colonel Wayne
McDonald. Yeah. He had to kind of walk a little tightrope around this, because I mean, he couldn't just flat out say that, it's all grounded in the occult and mysticism and kind of dogmatic type stuff. It had to be kind of grounded in a scientific endeavor. But I mean, it's.
I found some like kind of bullet points on what the document is claiming a little bit. It says that there's the potential for the human brain to act like a quantum receiver.
Yes.
Which is like, just saying that is like, it sounds kind of crazy just to say that out loud.
Yeah, I mean, we've had an episode on frequencies and sounds. This goes back to Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm wondering if some of this stuff was probably they drug up out of his research.
Also, that time is an illusion and consciousness exists independently of the body. Which is another.
You're getting into some deep stuff.
That's some treacherous waters right there. And then also using HemiSync, one can potentially access quote unquote the absolute, which is a non-physical realm of pure energy and information. So it's like I feel like each time you go, each bullet point, it gets a little bit more crazy, and to have that be something that this document kind of touches on is interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
of course, this is going into how the CIA is possibly is exploring this stuff for military and intelligence applications potentially.
Right, exactly. Right. And that's what I'm saying. This was in '83.
That's crazy.
So I mean, we're not talking like like in 1950. I mean, this is 1983.
Right.
They're still. It was just so much stuff going on. The 80s were just
a fun time.
It was crazy. I mean, I never knew the amount of stuff that was going on at that time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was an assessment of the gateway process, and that he was tasked with exploring, as I said, astral projection, out of body experiences, and how it might be used to train soldiers for intelligence gathering process, which is really the driving force. Because if I can in essence, step out of my body.
Yeah. Access
If my
some
consciousness
absolute,
can, in a tangible form, can leave my body, I can penetrate walls. It doesn't matter how far it is. I can literally, like, I can sit in my room and just kind of like my spirit self walks into a very sensitive situation in another country and just watch what's going on.
There's a cool like sci-fi concept of like being able to kind of like being able to access like a digital space, like going into some sort of like pod or put some sort of headgear on and put yourself inside a computer like verse.
Oh yeah,
so, like and it feels like that, but in like a more kind of.
They've talked about that now, about importing consciousness inside. Now with the studying the idea of quantum. Of quantum computers.
VR was a big thing. Is like but not in the same sense. But like I feel like VR is like that first step towards that sort of stuff. But like it feels like that concept, but like in a real world application of like sitting in a chair, meditating, putting on a helmet or something, and projecting yourself into another country potentially is like. Now we're dealing with some really fun stuff, or fun concepts. And again, like for like intelligence gathering, you talk about. Even if there's a 1% chance, like you're like, I mean, we got to figure out.
Well, I mean, obviously there are adherents that this worked. So I just want to tell you that this was not an abject failure.
Right. I just don't think it was controllable like they were, I think.
Right. Hoping. So like, for example, in the report, as I said, he had to make sure it was somewhat grounded in the hard sciences to a degree. So he connected the report to the following branches of study, to biomedicine, determine the physical processes and effects that occur, quantum mechanics, to kind of explain the interplay between consciousness and the physical world, theoretical physics to understand the physical world that would be transcended, and then Newtonian physics to ground his findings and dispel any occult or paranormal. So that there is that fear of doing this. So and it was considered somewhat of they call it a training, a system. So like you would go to the gym to exercise to get stronger. This was a way of strengthening those things that that would perfect this art, so to speak.
Right.
So, and it was a coherence. I'm kind of reading something here that the gateway, which describes are designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence. To the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres, so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere, so it escapes space time.
So this is where like the Monroe stuff comes in for me that I remember hearing about, because Robert Monroe apparently back in like the 50s or whatever had he had.
He was a radio broadcaster executive in the 50s, and then, but that wasn't where his passion was. He formed what they call the Ram Enterprises, which was a corporation that produced basically, radio programs for for networks or whatever the case may be. But he was interested in exploring how frequencies could impact the human mind.
Oh yeah. So and I think one of the innovations that he started in that sphere is something called binaural beats. Which is like where in a headphone.
Because sometimes I listen to that.
Yeah. In headphones, you play one frequency. Usually, I think it's like a low frequency in one ear. Like let's say for instance, your right ear is playing like 300, and in the left ear you play 305 hertz, and it's just different enough that both ears can hear the sounds differently, and it sounds like it's oscillating, like it's waving, which is something like as a musician we do like when tuning guitars. Let's say for instance like you're tuning your string to E, So you would play an E note that is like in tune, and you can hear frequencies whenever they as they get closer, the wave rubs more.
Right.
Until you're in tune, and then the wave feels slower.
Well, I guess
So as like you're tuning it, like if it's far off, the wave feels pretty big, and then as you're getting it closer, it feels like it's moving faster until you're in tune. All of a sudden, it like the wave moves slow again. So I think what this binaural beats thing does is it tunes it ever so slightly to where that wave is like perceptible.
And then I guess at that point, the mind can
again. This is what we're talking
transcend or break free of.
This is when we're talking about like frequencies and stuff. It's like you play a certain frequency and you play an opposing frequency, and like your brain can pick up this a perception of sound or whatever, and that's what they're saying is like causing your brain to like access something is what I think what the innovation is. I'm not sure what it actually does, but like you're saying, there's like a meditative aspect to it. There's like some things that you can that help relax you or something. So I think there's
supposedly it in essence, I guess in a way the way they've explained it as far as astral projection and projecting the mind, it's like, I guess once you reach that kind of magic balance of the frequencies, then somehow it kind of like separates you, so to speak. I mean, but Robert Monroe, he's a very interesting guy,
before we move on from it, is that the binaural beats that he was talking about supposedly was to induce states of like deep focus, sleep, and lucid dreaming, which is where I think for me where this whole thing started. I've heard people talk about lucid dreaming. I've heard stuff about astral projection, which I think is how I've heard about the Monroe stuff and the Monroe Institute.
Yep.
So that's like the
and that place still exists.
Oh yeah, I've heard.
I believe they're in Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, I think it's in Virginia.
I don't remember where it was at. I don't think.
But you actually, I mean, if you pull up YouTube, there are people who have done the gateway tapes.
Well, and that was what I was going to talk. I have notes on that too. Is like what the different tapes are. They're divided into quote unquote waves 1 through 6, and
well, let's talk about that.
Okay, so supposedly each one of them are like guided audio sessions or whatever. Where I think Monroe gets on there and talks about it. And I don't know what I didn't get the details on like what each wave or quote unquote tape does.
Right.
But I think it's like from what the notes I was able to find on them is I think they focus on deep relaxation, focused attention, visualization, energy, body movement, and affirmations and self-hypnosis kind of stuff. Where it's like I think it's supposed to prepare you to relax and prepare you in a state where you can like sleep and like project your body. It's like preparing your mind before you sleep, and then once you get into like the sleep space, because I think Robert Monroe claimed that he could like on a regular basis like fall asleep and just project his body out of or his consciousness out of his body.
Right. Well, he was interested in actually what was trying to drive. Excuse me. He was interested in a concept called hypnopedia. I don't know if you saw that. That was kind of what he was really interested in, which means learning via audio while asleep. So in essence, you would play something while you're in that meditative mode and you would learn it. So in essence, you can just kind of sit there and really kind of just like learn
subconsciously
learn something. So
But so for him, from what I heard about it is, the reason why he kind of started all this was because I think there was like I don't have the exact story, but there was a moment whenever he was in his bed or he was asleep one night and he was able to project his consciousness out of his body and like look back down at himself and have this whole like lucid, almost dream astral projection moment or whatever, which I think started him focusing on like how to like attenuate that, to like make it more, like you're saying, to train himself on it more, to kind of get better at this quote unquote art or skill or whatever you want to call it. I think that's where I think after a handful of years, that's when the government got interested, was whenever this guy is producing these tapes, is like talking about all this stuff and like talking about honing this skill of like projecting your consciousness, is when like the government got involved in a way and being like, how do we fund this and make this a teachable skill or whatever, if that's the case, which I'm not sure. That's where I think the friction comes in, is like, I don't think there was, where this document talks about, it's hard to kind of have concrete evidence or like proof of it working, and that's when the kind of craziness comes into it of like, what's the truth of
the technique is called hemisync,
mm-hmm.
and it's basically short for hemispheric synchronization.
Right.
The audio tracks are designed to bring your brain's left and right hemispheres into balance using specific sound frequencies. Said this synchronization, according to Monroe, allows the mind to enter profound states of meditation,
mm-hmm.
where time slows down, awareness expands, and in some cases, the user claims to leave the body entirely.
Right.
Matter of fact, that's where the term out-of-body experience,
right.
This is where it came from.
Yeah.
So just everybody out there, you've heard of this term. Where did it originate from? It originated from the Monroe Institute.
Right.
That's where it comes from.
It's crazy.
And of course it's built upon a few key ideas. So
mm-hmm.
this is kind of the foundation upon which this whole thing is resting on. Resonance and frequency. Everything vibrates.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this in our
yeah.
in our episode with frequencies. The body, the brain, even emotions.
Yeah.
By controlling brainwave frequencies, alpha, theta, and delta, you can shift your consciousness into altered states.
Right.
Then there's the holographic universe theory. The report leans heavily on the idea, and when I say report, that's that report we talked about in the beginning, the one that was published in 1983.
Data process, yeah.
That the idea that our reality is a projection, a hologram emanating from a deeper energetic source. That source, some believe, is consciousness itself.
Right.
Then, of course, there's left brain versus right brain. And we've all talked about your left brain, your right brain, and people who are left brain are more analytical, and more right brain is more artsy and stuff like that. But you kind of get the drift.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us live trapped in a linear, logical thinking, left brain dominance. Gateway seeks to balance this with the intuitive, spatial, creative side of the right brain, unlocking expanded awareness. And this is key here. Once the brain is entrained or synchronized, the user may begin to experience out-of-body states, remote viewing, astral travel, and even timeless consciousness.
And I think that's what those tapes were trying to like help train people towards.
That's exactly what
they were trying to get people to kind of experience, or like to get those first few steps out the way to like get them in that process.
Yeah, I mean, back to Monroe and kind of his, I said he formed the RAM Enterprises, and that was a precursor to eventually would be the Monroe Institute.
Right.
But as I said, he was obsessed with discovering methods of hypnopedia, which means learning via audio while asleep. He experimented with frequencies for years. And then unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, during one of his experiments, he experienced paralysis, bodily vibrations, and bright lights until he seemingly exited his body, floating somewhere near the ceiling. He says that was later publicized in articles and books, and it helped popularize the term out-of-body experiences. So this is where it comes from.
I think that was that situation I was talking about the first time back in like the 50s or whatever.
Right.
That first experience he had was that, where all this started for him. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Said for him that was proof of the spiritual world.
Right.
And then
I think that's when he started like working on how to
how to
hone that.
How to perfect that. So, I could see if they're supposedly having success, how the government could get really interested in that.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that's because I think this report was done in the 80s, but
83.
I think that it was a few years before that was
right.
Again, Monroe had made the tapes and was like talking about it and was like making a whole course and all that kind of stuff. Because again, obviously, I think if I'm not mistaken, also Monroe was kind of like, whenever it first started happening and he started like testing it, he didn't tell anybody about it, and he was trying to. It was a very much a because I think it's going to come across as crazy if you're like, when I go to sleep, I can project my spirit from out of my body. It's like, okay, that's a bit crazy. So I think it took him time to like.
It said early research at the Monroe Institute suggested that the gateway process had many practical applications: stress relief, pain, aesthetic, accelerated learning, and more. And of course, however, it would only be applied in an attempt to create psychic soldiers under the guidance of the U.S. Army. So you can see how the military gets involved with this, because, I could see that. As I said, if you can project your brain or project yourself in an immaterial form, what kind of, information you can gather. I don't have to send a spy anywhere. I can just sit right here and just go where I want to go, anywhere in the globe.
Right.
Which is, it's actually kind of weird, but
war never changes.
War never changes.
It's always
we're always looking for a
bigger weapon or a more
something to until eventually the aliens show themselves, and
of course
come to find out we need to put all that aside and realize we're all human beings and on one planet.
But I also like that. I didn't get a whole lot of details on it, but there's apparently like some things talking about like the whole hemisync stuff and all that is like there was like focus levels where there's like different states of consciousness. Labeled like focus 10 and focus 12 and all that kind of stuff. And apparently like 10 is like mind awake, body asleep stuff.
Right.
So it's like, I think we operate on a lower consciousness, but he's saying whenever you fall asleep, you can hit like a certain level of focus that could like, you're like, like I've been talking about, your consciousness fully awakes, and you can go to focus 11 and 12, which is how you can like project your body or your consciousness out of your body and that kind of stuff.
Like you said,
higher consciousness.
Like, mind awake, body asleep, energy conversion box. And this is a visualization tool to clear the mental clutter. So if I remember reading about this, it basically, in essence, they told the subject to kind of put all the junk in the box mentally and lock it up. And then that way that frees you to be able to do what you got to do.
Which is kind of a good practice.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of, I would think a lot of modern psychologists and psychiatrists probably.
And this is where this whole situation, I think, like you're saying, rides a fine line in this document between like, there's probably some really good stuff in here of like focusing, decluttering your mind, relaxing you, and probably allowing you to function better, or to function in some sort of like, more focused state, or like there is probably some good stuff in here. Now it's like, where does that line cross between now we're kind of getting into crazy.
Some would say it's all the same thing. I don't, I don't know, but another part of the I guess would be the first part would be resonant tuning. There's a chanting to align breath and energy flow. So I think they make you make a sound of a single
real
tune,
meditation stuff.
Meditation stuff like type of stuff. But users report feeling their body go numb, seeing vivid geometric shapes and colors, floating sensations, encounters with guides or intelligences, viewing events in the past or the future.
It feels like, or it sounds like you're on drugs, but with no drugs.
Yeah,
which again, if we're talking about the previous topics we've talked about, where the government was using drugs, to talk about the fact that with your mind you can have these states without it is interesting.
Some call it meditation, others call it a doorway to the soul.
Right.
So,
some real new age stuff. Some real new age type stuff.
Yeah, it said The 1983 report concluded that the gateway process was a valid, scientifically plausible method for expanding consciousness.
So you're saying
And
there's
that
a chance.
under the right conditions, the practitioner could experience the absolute and all-knowing, all-present eternal awareness.
Wow.
And this is a quote from the report. It is possible to achieve interaction with other forms of intelligence in the universe.
Uh-oh.
Let that sink in, people.
Yeah, government document.
Government document here.
Document.
We're not making this up. This
Right.
is not coming from a sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
This is hard research,
Yeah.
documented by the federal government
Right.
at some point in our, within our recent lifetime.
Yeah.
That a lot of resources went into, and probably they still are researching this stuff because I doubt it. This stuff has gone away. They shuffle it to another.
Oh, of course.
Another,
as we've
another
discussed.
deal.
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, there's critics of this stuff because the fact of the matter is, skepticism. People are going to be like, the experiences can be very subjective. It's unverifiable. How do you know? Now, of course, that kind of ties into the other topic we did with Project Stargate with remote viewing and some of the Robert McMonagle, who was probably the top remote viewer. He had documented success. So I don't know. I can understand how people would be a little suspicious of this stuff,
Right.
but they got some people in some high level places that at one time believed in this stuff. So,
and again, because I'm also the skeptic a lot of times with this sort of stuff, it's like, do I believe that anyone could probably do it? Maybe, but like, do I also think that I know for a fact that there are very unique, superhuman people that like have some very unique gifts or very special things, or that are catered towards a very certain thing. So like, who's to say that there isn't one or two people out there like these people like Monroe and like who you're talking about, McMonagle or something, that like have some sort of attunement or perception or is wired a little differently that can experience something? Because I've met some like really intelligent people that just their brain works differently than mine.
yeah.
And it's like, who's to say that that's not happening with these people? Can we all have a remote viewing experience? Can we all astrally project our body? Maybe, maybe not. But is there somebody out there who could probably just like go take a nap and cast their consciousness out of their body? Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say no because I don't know. I've never experienced that before.
No.
The craziest thing I had was I had sleep paralysis one time that messed me up. But
Well, I'm going to tell you, this stuff is, you have to be careful with this stuff because I think the idea that you can potentially interact with other intelligences, I have to, a part of me, there's a bit of a flag that goes up because I do believe in this stuff. I don't believe it's science fiction. I do believe that we are still very ignorant of our own reality. And I'm not talking about in the religious as far as the supernatural, which I do believe exists.
Yeah.
I think our own reality, there's still a lot we do not know. That we do have the ability to be a lot more advanced as far as to be able to expanding our consciousness and telepathy, being able to communicate mind to mind.
I think we talked about some of that with previous episodes, like on how old history actually is, how long humans have been here, and the potential.
People have used herbs and stuff like to achieve altered states of consciousness. It's been done throughout history.
Right.
So I mean, these concepts of altered consciousness and being able to reach out kind of beyond yourselves and interact with other beings has been around a long time.
Right.
So there's nothing unusual with that. I'm as I said, I'm fairly open to the idea that, and this kind of stuff just, to me proves to me that it's definitely grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is not made up BS.
Right.
I mean, there's a kernel of truth to this. Yes, can it be subjective? Hey, maybe so, but you
Right.
know, what is subjective? You know,
Yeah.
If you've experienced it, you know, I look at people like Robert McMonagle and some of these other people that supposedly have been able to remote view and see things. How do you explain that?
Right.
How do you explain that? I mean,
Right.
you just can't just dismiss it and it's all just BS. No, there's two. If you want to be serious about the topic, then you have to kind of take it serious.
Right.
So
And that's
yeah.
why with these kind of things, even though I may not believe a lot of it implicitly, I still like to find some truth that I can glean out of it, or at least some fun that I can have with it. And that's what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said, a lot of this stuff is fun to talk about. It's interesting. It's really interesting to know that there's actual official government documents showing the actual research and the science behind this stuff. So,
and as I've said for like the past like 2 or 3 of these episodes, I'm really interested to know like what secret project or experience or whatever it is being researched now that we won't know until like 20, 30 years from now.
Course not. I'm sure things will come out, 30 years from now. We'll be going, God, all this stuff was
you spend that much money on that?
Yeah. It went on in 2025,
exactly,
that this stuff was going on, that they're experimenting with this. But to me, that's what I'm saying. If they've achieved a measure of success, and that gives you somewhat of a tactical advantage,
hey,
look, you're going to look at every opportunity you can. Yep. Whatever edge you can get, you're going to do, because I do believe that probably the Soviets, probably the Chinese are very much probably looking into this stuff. Same time, they want to be able to gather intel on us.
Of course.
And sometimes you wonder about how certain things. How'd you get that information?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, but
crazy stuff. But it's fun. I love talking about these kind of interesting topics that kind of go a little bit more into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, this is. I mean, we are. I don't know. I mean, it's. I'm a bit shocked about just how much information is out there with this stuff. Now, regarding this report, and there is a bit of some controversy report there. It's supposedly, when this was declassified, there was a page missing.
Oh, I did hear about this. Yes.
Which, now I have seen some things where that page is...
Wasn't it like page 24, 25 or something
23.
Like that? 23.
Yeah, I think that...
I remember that, yeah.
A matter of fact, you probably look...
you're right.
Look at the document right there and probably tell you. But I think I saw something where supposedly they found that page. Now, some people wonder why the CIA left that out of the document when it was declassified. But supposedly that was McDonald's. Maybe he wanted people to really kind of look into this stuff and kind of come to their own conclusions. Maybe there was something in there that maybe tainted something. I don't know.
Yeah.
As I said, one theory is that McDonald admitted this page to drive individuals to explore the gateway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as I'm saying, if you want to know, just simply Google the Monroe Institute. It's a real place that you can go and actually go do this stuff. I mean, you really can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I'm a religious person. I'm a Christian, and so as someone who I believe there is like a spiritual realm. This kind of stuff tries me a little bit with like what they consider to be like astral projecting and that kind of stuff, and can you actually access some sort of spiritual realm, which I think is kind of interesting and scary to think about, and also something that I feel like I wouldn't want to mess with. You know what I mean? Or for me at least, I get kind of.
Well, I guess
I feel like that's for me. I feel like that's someplace I wouldn't.
Right. I mean, I get that. I do, and I understand that because I'm very much in the same camp. That I said that kind of goes into this. Are we messing with things?
Right.
And I'm not saying. It's just, I'm in a weird place with this stuff.
Right.
I really am because I get in these conversations with a lot of very religious people
Mm-hmm.
Who are very sensitive about these things, and I understand my own teachings of my own faith of
Mm-hmm.
what it teaches about this stuff, about seeking aid or trying to learn stuff like that, and the dangers. And I truly believe that there is a degree of some truth as to why you go back to ancient Judaism of why there was some prohibitions on this divination and these kinds of things. I think, of course, they didn't really quite understand maybe some of the is because there are maybe unintended consequences.
Right.
Does that open up doorways? Does it, things you can't close back, and then you're forever kind of marred with it. But I don't know. I mean, some of these people, like you listen to interviews with Robert McMonagle.
Yeah,
he's just some normal dude. He's been doing it forever, and it's like he's been living a normal life.
The reason why I brought that up was because from what I was reading on, like Monroe talks about like an entity being around, like, in that space, and making him feel comforted, but but not safe when that entity's around. It's like things like that. It's like you start getting into a point for me where it's like, for me at least, like I said, and what I believe, it's all fun and games until like that sort of stuff starts happening. It's like if you're just if there's no sort of implications and you're not actually reaching some sort of like spiritual dimension, or like if you're not communing with some sort of evil spirit or whatever, it's probably all fine. And I'm just talking about for myself, of like if we're talking about what I probably believe in or what I ground my faith and belief in, is like if that sort of stuff was to happen for me, I trust my gut a lot of times, and for me, like hearing that makes me feel like you're stepping into something that I don't feel like you should be involved in.
I get it.
I'm just saying. I'm not saying.
Get it.
And I'm not
Really
saying that someone else shouldn't do that. If you feel comfortable and you don't have any convictions towards doing that, go ahead. But for me, I just know if I was projecting my spirit out of my body and was to like be encountered with some sort of other entity that makes me feel uncomfortable, or like, and that's what for me, I'd be like, respectfully, I'm out.
I mean, think of but think of what was the guy that we did the episode on, the guy that Port Arthur's named after. But suppose remember in his day, he said there were these like brownies that gave him
little
insights
fairies,
and fairies or whatever the case may be. So, I think maybe Tesla was probably on to some of this stuff. Oh, it was not. It was page 25 on that report. That was just kind of go back to that real quick. But it was why was it removed? No one knows. Or theories, but I think I saw something where they supposedly they've found it and it's available now if you want to see it. But initially, when the CIA said they didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
So when this report was declassified and made available, when people did Freedom of Information Act, CIA would just come back and say we don't have it. It's the reason it's not part of the report. Why? Who knows? But you never know. Maybe it could just simply be the page got lost.
Oh, right, of course.
Pages fall down, you lose it, or whatever the case may be. It could be like an Occam's razor type of explanation.
Yeah.
Or it could be something a little bit more. So I mean, I'm not going to necessarily, discount all that, but of course, I'm not. Looking for a conspiracy around every corner.
Of course.
I'm definitely open to it because a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of kernels of truth to this stuff. So I'm always open to that. So But yeah,
That's interesting.
this has been a very, very interesting topic. It just kind of reminds me regarding this stuff, regarding all the stuff they picked up from the Nazis.
Oh yeah.
I mentioned it before. There was a movie called the Atticus Institute where that was the premise. The CIA was experimenting on supposedly people that were possessed.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to wonder, I guarantee you this was part.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
the movie says it was not. Of course, people say otherwise, that it actually, this would make sense that if they were, considering everything else we've talked about and all these documents about contacting other entities and all this, that, could it be maybe there were experimenting with. Matter of fact, it's I believe it's the government's only officially documented case of actual possession.
Interesting.
Actually, governmentally documented. So
okay,
yeah, it's not like a deal. Now, of course, I mean, as a Catholic, there's. We deal with exorcisms. That's a part of the history of the church,
right.
And that goes all the way back to Christ casting out demons,
of course,
and of course, and subsequently his apostles after that. So, I mean, the idea of these other intelligences, I can see how, once again, if you reach out to these other intelligences, what doors are you opening up?
Right. Or subjecting yourself to.
Right.
Or,
and there's dangers to that. And, I'm not saying they do that or another thing, we talk about the Emerald Tablets, or you talk about the, Tesla talked about this just like universal consciousness.
Yep.
These themes are very common with all these people.
Even this brought it up as the quote unquote the absolute.
Right.
That same sort of
whatever
thing
term you want to call
right.
it, there's this universal bank of knowledge that you can access through certain techniques. And maybe the secret of the universe is sounds in frequencies. Because if everything vibrates, how do you tune that?
Right.
And if you tune it right, who knows what results you might get.
This may be a bit crazy, but like I have believed that for a long time about like everything having like everything is sound, everything is, and I think for me at least, it is grounded a lot in like my religious beliefs of like God spoke everything into existence.
Right.
So it's like just the sound, like if that's the case, if I'm to believe that God can speak things,
then there's sound, there's frequencies, and there's like everything kind of baked into the DNA of creation.
And again, like I'm not one of those people that don't believe in evolution, or that don't believe in like some of these like really hard scientific facts. For me, a lot of times it reinforces my faith. A lot of times that like I think that God is a God of order and
He's rational,
justice, and I think that there are systems in place, even like the fact that your body can function and I can sit here and have all these like internal workings, like everything is like, I think has its place and everything does a certain, and I feel like God puts things into motion and things keep on going. And that's that there are orders and there are things in this world that I feel like I love learning about like science and how things are made up, and like once you start getting in the detail of all of it, for me it's like it just gives me an appreciation and a perspective of like I still think it all for me goes right back down to I think that I believe in a God that can create all that can make all that happen.
Well, I've always believed that God is a rational being.
Yeah, He
created rational creatures.
Right.
He gave us tools to think rationally.
Right.
And we are to understand our world as rational. It's governed by laws. It's there is an underpinning of all this stuff. So I mean, I'm the whole evolution thing. I mean, that could be another topic altogether.
Right.
But
I was saying that as like a reference.
Right.
Of like,
exactly.
Once you start getting into like even what we just talked about today, this like astral projection stuff, this like kind of sci-fi hippie kind of
new age
stuff.
Stuff.
I don't want to discredit it because maybe there is some sort of like you're saying. I think that if you access, because I do believe at some point, probably whenever we die, our consciousness does go and becomes
Right.
becomes
Whether
with
your
God in
consciousness,
some way.
your soul, however that is, whatever is you
Yeah.
leaves your body upon
Yeah.
your death. And so
And if I'm to believe that like that goes somewhere, maybe it does become one with some absolute God.
absolute,
And
right.
So I'm like, who knows? I don't know. All right, I don't know. But it's
mean,
fun to talk about.
It is very fun to talk about. So yeah,
But yeah.
I'm open. But this has been a very interesting topic. I encourage people to Google the document.
Yeah.
And
Look into it.
read it. And
How does this make you feel?
How does it make you? Yeah, exactly. How does it make you feel?
Yeah.
That
Because I think you're right. I think some people will be very uncomfortable by the idea of
that there was actually success. That our government felt that it was important enough to continue funding this stuff for a very long period of time.
Right.
So, and believe it or not, it's still going on to this day in the form of the Monroe Institute.
Yep.
So, which you can Google and make an appointment and probably go and
do
go
some
learn,
classes. Yeah.
go do some classes and learn this stuff. I watched a ton of YouTube videos of people who did the gateway tapes.
Yeah. And maybe even you not being able to astrally project or connect with some sort of higher consciousness. At the very least, if it's meditative and helps you relax, helps you focus, maybe there is some good. Maybe there is something interesting, beneficial that I don't know all the details of. Now that we kind of wrapped up with this episode, is there anything you want to talk about? Usually a lot of times we banter about our lives at the top of the show, but I feel like with some of these it gets a little bit hard to kind of talk about.
I mean, I'm just it's just kind of it's keeping on. I've got a lot going on right now, and I'm fixing to go through some life changes.
Yeah,
and so I'm kind of gearing up for that, and nothing bad, everyone. It's all good. Right. But I'm just. My life will be changing, and it's going to be different for me, and in a good way. So,
I always like to check in like this because it's always fun to just kind of have a moment.
What about you?
I recently I had the opportunity to play with a band, like play a show, and they specifically said they didn't want any kind of shout out, so I'm not going to do it. But I have some friends in that business that sometimes whenever like a musician can't play or can't be around, I'll fill in as just like, for a local show or from like a show not too far away. And so, and one of those opportunities came up, and I almost didn't take it because I was like, I don't know, but it was a really big show and it was really awesome. And I appreciated the ability to be able to play. And I really do enjoy like it satisfies me in a way that nothing quite else does, to be able to play music on a stage and have that. It was stressful. There's a lot of moving parts and all the different things that go involved in like a big show like that. But like at the end of it all, it was really nice to be able to just do what I really enjoy doing, which is just like playing music for people.
That's what's going to bring you joy.
And I realize that because sometimes I can get in my own head. And I'm saying this because I'm saying this for myself in the future because I want to listen back to this potentially, but also for anybody who's listening as well. Is it sometimes like there are these moments whenever I feel like I'm in the routine of it all, and everything kind of sucks or everything is frustrating or whatever, or just you're in the rhythm and the routine. But like after getting the preparation for that show and after playing it and doing it, like I felt like nothing really could bring me down. And it encouraged me, and it made me so happy that I was like, even though things are all crazy around this situation, I'm having a great time. And I was able to be with some friends. I was able to hang out and have a good time playing music. And it was just like,
there you go.
I need to realize that like I have many opportunities like that in my life, that like I need to focus on some of these like really
enjoy those moments,
enjoy these really high moments. But at the same time, like also realize that like, it's okay that like things aren't always perfect and things are kind of upsetting sometimes, but like realize that like things are good. Appreciate that. And of course, share those wins with people around you. The fact that I was able to get this opportunity was really awesome. And I was able to share that with some of my friends and family, and they were super excited and proud. And I was like, man, I've got some great people in my life that really care about me and that really love me. And I think I take that for granted sometimes. And it was just nice to kind of share in that moment. And now all of it's done. And I was like, man, I'm kind of back down from cloud 9 a little bit. And it's just, anyways, it was just a really fun experience. And I wanted to personally thank the people that helped make that experience. I don't think they listen to the show. And like I said, they don't want me to shout them out, so I'm not going to. But just know that here I am saying it publicly. I really appreciate the opportunity. But with all that being said, I just wanted to say that. But for anybody out there who wants to share their experiences with what I just talked about or with this whole episode and how you feel about the whole consciousness conversation or whatever, we have the comment sections on Spotify and on YouTube that you can leave us your responses. We also have an email address, getoffendedtogether@gmail.com, as well as the website, retrospectpod.com. Or sorry, I think it's retrospectpodcast.com. My bad. Usually that's Stoney's.
That's Stoney's usually talking about that.
Right. But anyways, until next time, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Whether you believe the gateway is real spiritual technology or a mental illusion, one thing is certain: it pushes us to ask the questions that matter. Who are we really? What is consciousness? And what lies beyond the veil? Till then, keep your mind open, keep your soul grounded, and remember, the gateway is already inside you. Goodbye, everyone, and God bless.